Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. We've already covered the skins released in 2021, which means it's time to talk about the champions released in 2021, go through my review of each of the champion releases that happened this year, and kind of give my thoughts on not only the design, but also where they've ended up following their release. Now, 2021 did not have as many champions as we expected, or that Riot expected, actually. They deliberately held off on the marksmen and supports this year due to not wanting to tie them into the Arcane event, but not wanting to release them alongside Arcane and say they're not a part of the event, because then they're just going to pull focus from Arcane and vice versa. So, Riot ended up only releasing 4 champions, therefore, the top laner, jungler, and both of the mid laners, and they only released 1 VGU this year as well, which made this a pretty disappointing year in terms of overall champion releases. That said, we still get a bunch of truly unique champions and a VGU for one of the most dated champions in the roster, plus the announcement of ASUs going forward. So, in my opinion, it's not all bad, but I'm definitely looking forward to 2022, where if Riot release those 2 champions that they intended for this year alongside the 6 that they intended for next year, alongside VGUs, 2022 could be a bumper crop of champions. So either way, excited to see that, but let's go ahead and hop all the way back to the beginning of 2021 with our first champion release in Viego, the Ruined King. Now, love him or hate him, guys, you can't deny that Viego's release was a big deal. Viego is one of the original boogeymen of the League of Legends plot. He was originally just a background element for the Shadow Isles to kind of say, yeah, we need a justification for why we have spooky Ghostland, so Viego, the Ruined King guy, is going to be it. And it finally took until now, right, Season 11, where we finally get the character in-game, which I think was far from a guarantee. I really do think for the longest period of time, Riot were very much so, this is just a background element, we're never going to do that much with him, and it took Senna's release and Riot's realization that players like characters that were existing in the plot beforehand becoming champions for them to say, okay, cool, let's do Viego. And I mean, this guy has his own game named after him regardless, and has an extremely unique kit. Like, regardless of whether or not you hate him, you hate everything he stands for, it makes sense for Viego to be in League of Legends, and so far he's actually been quite a popular champion. It's no surprise why. He has a fun sort of reset type gameplay with him possessing champions then popping out with his R. He's simple to pick up. He's extremely easy to play, guys. He's difficult to master, but very easy to just grab and play. He's a major antagonist. He's a hot guy. Like, what else do you need for this character to have been a hit? Now, he has had some balance issues since release, which I think are more tied to Divine Sunder being overtuned than anything else. Honestly, I think if that item was less good, I really feel like Viego wouldn't have been as big of a deal in professional play. He did need some nerfs. Obviously, Viego had too much lane sustain at the beginning of his release, so Riot did have to tap that down and really say, you are a jungler, my dude. But I think that without Sunder, a lot of the balance issues that Viego has had would not exist still today. And after the lane sustain, he would have ended up being fine. So I feel like he's been a fairly balanced inclusion that hasn't needed constant trips to the patch notes, unlike Sylas, another champion that steals champion abilities. Sylas has been ping-ponging around through the patch notes for ages now, either being unplayable or the best champion in the game. And Viego hasn't had this, right? He's never gone between that ping-pong. He's either been too good or still good, which I think is a really good place for champions to end up. And part of this is because he mechanically becomes the champion he possesses, which means that the value of whomever Viego possesses is tied to how well they're doing, as opposed to Sylas, who can beat up weak champions by stealing their ultimate and being ahead of them. If Viego kills an 0-5 Teemo, he becomes an 0-5 Teemo, and while yes, he can use that for an ultimate reset, he doesn't get any extra value from his passive, right? He gets, okay, a bit of a heal and an ultimate reset. That's not that big of a deal. That's not worth a passive slot, in my opinion. So I actually really think that Riot have gotten a good design with Viego. It's extremely unique. I think it works for the character direction they chose to take the Ruined King in, and I've just been a huge fan of the character ever since his release. I think realistically the only problems I have with Viego are how weird his ability interactions are thanks to his passive. For example, he can execute minions after possessing a support with an execute item. He keeps enhanced auto attack effects after casting them then leaving the champion's body, so you can press E on Blitzcrank, pop out, and then auto attack a guy and knock him up, which is really funny. But that's sort of just, it comes with the territory of Viego, and I kind of like it because it does mean that if you have a very broad champion knowledge, Viego rewards you for that. I think this champion was such a good design. Character-wise, I'm super happy to see him. I'm disappointed that Riot fridged him at the end of the Sentinels of Light event, but really excited about the champion overall, and I think he was a great inclusion to the game. Moving on down to our second champion release, Gwen. Now, Gwen is not what anyone would have expected when Riot first started teasing her. I think we were all expecting Isolde, Viego's wife, the shattered queen, but we have to settle for this random animated doll, or sorry, not a doll, a real person for some arbitrary, still unexplained reason. And I think that's my biggest problem with the character. There's still so much that's unexplained about Gwen. Why did she become alive? Why does she have access to the Hallowed Mist when no one else does? What is her character doing now that Viego's defeated? There's just, like, no explanation now that Sentinels of Light is over, which leaves Gwen's character a bit in the lurch, which is the common theme with all of the champions released this year, is that now that the Sentinels of Light event is over, they sort of don't have a reason to exist anymore. They're just kind of hanging out in limbo with the major reason for them to exist already being concluded, and Riot's given a couple of small tidbits about, yeah, well, Gwen is fighting Shadow Isles, we guess, and Akshan is still looking for Shadia's killer, but it's not enough for me. I really feel like you removed the biggest goal of the champion from their existence in the Sentinels of Light event, and now they don't have a reason to exist, but that's sort of besides the point here. Now, mechanically, I really like Gwen from the perspective that she's another AP fighter in the top lane, which is a huge deal because the top lane is so hard to pick ability power in. I can name Mordekaiser and Rumble off the top of my head, and now Gwen, of course, but, like, what other AP top laners are there? And no, don't say tanks. Tanks don't count. They do magic damage, but that doesn't make them an AP damage source, right? And this is a big deal because it's really easy to play AD in the mid lane, right? You have Yasuo, you have AD assassins, you have marksmen now running around, and it's really easy to get AD in the jungle. There are a lot of AD junglers running around as well, which means that if you end up with an AD jungle and an AD mid, which is pretty likely, your ability to play AP in the top lane was extremely curtailed. So Gwen being introduced as an AP top laner in that regard was already a huge boon. I also think Gwen's play pattern is super unique. She doesn't have the ability to do a significant amount of burst damage. Instead, Gwen can cut anyone down to size by spamming tiny but constant amounts of true damage on top of having a deceptive amount of sustain to help keep her going in fights. Her major defensive ability is also extremely unique. I think Hallowed Mist is a really cool ability that gives Gwen the ability to kind of play in and out of her zone dealing with champions in that regard, which I just think is it makes her a really fun and fluid champion to play. There is a little bit of clunk to her play patterns, trying to recast her R, for example, but I think she's nonetheless found her niche. That said, her play rate is pretty small, which is a little sad given how unique she is and how universal her appeal is. I feel like part of this is due to the nerf she took due to pro appeal. She's going to be a tricky one to balance due to how powerful her defensive ability is, and because of how much sustain she's able to get off of her passive, it's kind of deceptively large. But I overall think she does enough from a mechanical standpoint just to justify her release, and I really like the fact that we have another AP champion top lane, so Gwen kind of gets a pass from me in that regard. Moving on down to Akshan, our number 3 champion released this year, and my fear-mongering about a mid-lane marksman has mostly been for naught at this point. Akshan's been a fairly balanced mid-laner that hasn't put undue pressure on traditional mid-lane staples, nor has he been overpowered in the bot lane. He really kind of feels like a fairly underpowered AD carry if you're playing him down in the bot lane, and mid lane he sort of plays like a bit of an AD assassin or wave clear champion, or just, he doesn't do that much that really makes me feel like he's too broken, right? Unlike Lucian, who's sort of able to engage on you no matter what the situation is as an AD mid laner, which makes him more unhealthy, Akshan has certain hoops he has to jump through before he can really force a full engagement on a champion, and even if he does that, he has very few ways of getting out, so because he doesn't reset his dash like Lucian can. So in that regard, Akshan is not exactly the most bully of AD mid laners or of marksman mid laners, which I really do like, and even the revive passive, which I think a lot of people were worried about, myself included, has turned out to not be as good as initially expected. As it turns out, Riot put enough controls on this ability that it's not too powerful, which, you know, hey, I think it was fair for us to all be concerned, but as it turns out, it's not actually that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Hilariously, the one place Akshan's been nerfed this year is with regards to Heroic Swing, which is like the one ability I don't think anyone expected to get nerfed, so that's kind of funny. I like that he's playable in the bot lane. I think Heroic Swing, while we're on the subject, is an extremely fun to use ability that gives him a lot of versatility and helps him feel unique. The rest of the tools in his kit also contribute to that. His ability to Heroic Swing while firing his ultimate, or to fish for Qs through waves, or to do a lot of different things with his passive. There's just a lot about Akshan that I really like that has made him feel like a very fluid champion to play, which I think is something that Riot have gotten very good at doing, is making sure that their champions, even if they're not that mobile, still feel fluid to play, which I think is super important. From a character perspective, Akshan's just another character left in the lurch following the Sentinels of Light event. I guess he's still looking for Shadia's killer, but also he got over that, but not really. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. I feel like Riot should not be designing champions just for a story element and then abandoning them. They need to create the character and then find a place for them to work on the story, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. I think Akshan was another really good champion release. I think he does a lot of unique things, and he ends up standing out on his own from a lot of the crowd of other mid lane marksmen, which I do quite like. And moving on down to our fourth champion release this year, which is Vex the Gloomist. The worst part about Vex, honestly, is just that her release was delayed. Vex coming out after the Sentinels of Light event had concluded just makes her feel like she's a character without a purpose, because even though we know she did things in Sentinels of Light, her coming out afterwards means that the hype is gone, right? We have no context for what Vex was actually doing during the event. We're just like, oh, and here's Vex now. You can play her now. Have fun. And I think Vex is just not an interesting character in any context, unfortunately. As a character, she's not that interesting because I get that Yordles are supposed to be caricatures for the most part, and but Vex plays the teenage angst angle completely straight, which just leads to an obnoxious, repetitive script, and it kind of makes me wonder what this character is even going to be doing in the future. At least with Kled, or Poppy, or Heimerdinger, you get a sense for what this character could be getting up to in their day-to-day. Vex, it's like she lounges around the Shadow Isles and is depressed. Okay, cool. That doesn't make her interesting. That doesn't make me actually want to play her. And mechanically, I feel like Vex falls flat in a couple of different places. I do like the soft counter to mobility that she has, but I also feel like Riot could have played up that angle harder. Right now it feels like she doesn't have a huge niche as an anti-mobility champ because she can't shut them down. All she can do is punish them with damage, but if Vex falls behind, the damage is irrelevant, which means that you just kind of get to keep doing your thing as Yasuo or LeBlanc or whomever you happen to be playing as, and Vex kind of feels like she doesn't have a purpose. And the rest of her kit is kind of bland. She has skill shot damage, delayed AoE damage, and a shield button. It's just a bunch of buttons that do traditional mage things without a lot of interesting targeting paradigms or anything about them. I do like the R's reset and combo potential, as well as her constant terrifies to give her a more of a disruptive force in teamfights, but I don't think she's really that unique amongst a sea of traditional mid lane mages. I just don't feel like she does that much that other mages also don't do. That said, her play rate is still fairly high, so what do I know? And she's a champion, though, that I feel like we're waiting on the pros to see if she's really broken. Right now, she seems fine to me, but along with Akshan, I feel like once the pros get their hands on her, we'll see if she's actually that balanced or if she's potentially too good. So either way, I don't think she's that big of a deal right now. I feel like she's the most disappointing release this year. There are a couple of fun things that she does, but overall, just kind of a meh champion release for me. And finally, moving on to Dr. Mundo. The rework came out this year, and he is looking better than ever, or at the very least, like he belongs in the game again. I do like the new appearance. It's a great take on Mundo that doesn't pretty him up too much, but still captures the majority of his original personality. I feel like his new lore also finds a way to make Mundo feel like a part of Runeterra, while also keeping his slightly comedic theme. Old Mundo indexed way too hard in comedy, whereas new Mundo is a lot more of a comedic character, but still dark in a certain extent, and still feels like he's a part of the game, as opposed to being sort of outside of it, but still being introduced into it, if that makes sense. And Mundo's kit, I think, is fine. I feel like Riot could have given him way more opportunity to outplay or have skill expression by taking away some of the least interactive parts of his kit, but I get that they wanted to keep him simple to play and maintain some of the iconic parts of his kit, like the R healing and cleaver spam, so in that regard, that left them with very little ability to actually introduce more skill expression to the champion. I do think that they did add some things. The W reactivate timing, punting minions with his E, and R's low health bonuses at least make Mundo more interesting to play than his previous incarnation. And that's not even touching on his extremely powerful and super unique passive, where he gets to just ignore crowd control every couple of seconds and can potentially turn that into more healing for himself. Like, that's a really cool aspect of his kit that wasn't present in the original one, and that does a lot to make him feel more unique. But I feel like he just doesn't do that much that old Mundo didn't do, and therefore he kind of falls off a little bit. But honestly, I didn't play Mundo at all before his rework, and now I do. So it's hard for me to say that the rework was a failure. I think it really did a lot to make Mundo more popular, both from a mechanical and character perspective, so I have to say Riot probably did a good job. Balance-wise, he did see a stint in pro play before Riot nerfed him down in the top lane and gave him some jungling power back, which is fine, and it opened Mundo up to a play pattern he used to have, so I can't be too mad about it, all things considered. Honestly, big fan. I can't say that there's anything about the Mundo rework that I would necessarily change. Like I said, he's doing well enough that I'm playing him now, and I never used to play this champion, so it ends up working out. Anyways, that is going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts on the new champion releases are down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you think I have misrepresented some of the new releases. Let me know all that down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.